My kind of involvement in Extinction Rebellion began towards the end of last year when I was starting to become increasingly anxious about what I was seeing in the newspapers and what I was seeing from the climate scientists that I follow on Twitter and so on. I'm a scientist myself. I'm a neuroscientist, not a climate scientist, but I know how to read a graph. And the thing that was a trigger for me and made me do something I've never done before, which is become an activist, was this graph, which is called the hockey stick graph. It's very, very famous in climate science circles. And I had not really appreciated, I knew that there was a problem with greenhouse gases, and I knew that scientists were getting increasingly concerned, but it wasn't until I saw the graph that I realized quite how much trouble we're in. So this is a graph of carbon dioxide levels for the last 2,000 years. And you can see that it's been pretty steady at around about 280 parts per million. So carbon dioxide is a trace gas. That means that there's not very much of it in the atmosphere, but the amount that is there is enough to trap heat and keep the Earth warm, and it's what stops us from being a ball of ice. And it's maintained at that level because of the activity of plants and animals. The animals produce carbon dioxide and plants take it up, and they have this kind of cycling. And for, in fact, about the last 12,000 years, that cycling has meant that we've had a very stable climate, and we've been able to build our civilizations. We've been able to develop agriculture, we've been able to develop industry and technology, and we've made our lives very, very comfortable. One of the things that happened, though, in the development of civilization is that we discovered fossil fuels as being a very good source of energy for the new technology that we were developing. And so about 150 years ago, we started using fossil fuels, digging them out of the ground and burning them. And that has had an extraordinary effect on the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And it's skyrocketing. And I had not appreciated just how fast those levels are rising, nor how little effect we have had, even in the 30 years since we started to realize that this was a problem. So despite the fact that we've had the IPCC and we've had all of these summits and we've had all of the sustainability initiatives and this, that and the other, we've had no effect on carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. The other graph, which is very, very striking, is what's happening to global temperatures in that same period of time. So since the Industrial Revolution began, the Earth has been warming. And it's been warming very, very noticeably. So scientists have been measuring this, but also we're starting to see the effects of heat in the weather events, extreme weather events that we're starting to experience now as a consequence of the warming. This is just a snippet of the many events that have popped up just in the last couple of years. Here, 500,000 cattle died in Queensland because of an extraordinary set of rainfall events that flooded the entire state. Many wildfires in various parts of the earth have sprung up. So there have been fires in Siberia, fires in Sweden. These fires in California destroyed millions of hectares of forest, pumping carbon into the air and destroying the livelihoods of many people, wiping out a town, killing people. The city of Chennai in India this summer ran out of water, so they had to start shipping water in by tanker. So these people have had to queue up in 50-degree heat. Imagine what 50 degrees feels like when you're sitting outside with your jar trying to get water to keep your family alive. Mozambique experienced an extremely severe cyclone that displaced 1.5 million people and killed hundreds and hundreds of people. And then a month later they had another one. So these are happening all over the world with increasing frequency. Now, despite the fact that we've known about this for 30 or 40 years, and we've had all of these initiatives to try and come up with global solutions to this problem, you can see that the rise in carbon dioxide levels has not even flattened. So all of this effort has been without effect. So effort has not been translated into results, and results are what counts. So what counts is not the fact that we're doing stuff, but the fact that we're succeeding and we're not succeeding. The other side of the coin, along with the changes in climate, is the changes in the distribution of wildlife that we're seeing around the planet. So we depend on the actions of millions and millions and millions of species for the environment that we live in. So our oxygen is made by plants, and our food is made by plants and animals, and carbon dioxide is taken up by plants. And we are making huge changes in the biosphere by destroying habitats, by using pesticides, by raising the temperature of the Earth, which is driving many species to extinction because they can't adapt. Nothing like this has ever happened in the history of life on Earth, that climate has changed so quickly. Despite what we now understand about what's going on, our use of fossil fuels is not abating. In fact, it continues to rise, and it's continuing to accelerate in its rise. It's unbelievable how little effect we've had on our behaviour. So we're seeing an increasing rise worldwide in the use of these fossil fuels that continue to pump these greenhouse gases into the air. These fossil fuels are being used to drive the consumer capitalism that is the way that we run our society. So the way that we sustain our economies is that we pull resources out of the ground, we turn those resources into objects, we sell those objects to people, people buy them, they stack them up in their houses, they ship them off in carrier bags to charity shops and so on, they get put into the landfill and then we go and buy more. So that's how we run our species right now. And this is all pumping more and more fossil fuels into the air. The end result of that is that within the space, essentially of one generation, so we have been doing this to some extent for thousands of years, but it's been increasing, and it's really only in the last generation that the increase has become really, really noticeable. So within my lifetime, we've gone from a planet that was very rich in biodiversity with lots and lots of insects and lots of animals of all kinds. We are driving so many species to extinction, and we're on a path to driving ourselves to extinction as well if we can't get on top of this problem. So we have taken this bounteous planet that was given to us by our forebears, and we're passing on to our children and grandchildren a hugely depleted planet, which is going to be too hot for comfortable human existence, and is going to be very poor in biodiversity, and it's going to be lacking all those wonderful animals that we've come to know and love. And we will never get that back again. Once we've warmed the Earth, it won't cool. Once we've driven species to extinction, they won't come back again. When there are no more tigers, there will never be tigers again. When there are no more polar bears, that's the end of polar bears. When there are no more bees to pollinate our crops, that's it for growing crops. So these destructive changes are irreversible. And some people are starting to think, we don't want this to happen. And they are ordinary people like me, people like you, like ordinary citizens are banding together and saying to our leaders, enough is enough, we want this to stop. And Extinction Rebellion is one of these organisations. They kind of sprang onto the world stage not even quite a year ago. They are part of a social change movement called Rising Up. And they made their declaration of rebellion in October last year. And then they did a very big action in London, which was to blockade the London bridges. And they hit the media headlines. And a lot of people like me saw these people appear and thought, so I'm not alone in my feelings about what's going on and my feelings that this isn't right. There's a whole bunch of other people out there too. And maybe there's a possibility of a critical mass. Maybe if we all got together, we could do something, make some change happen. And so I signed up, and many other people signed up, and we decided to try and do something, to try and make our leaders understand that we need to change. So we have three basic demands. One of them is that the ordinary populace needs to be made to understand what's going on. We've realised, we listen to the scientists for whatever reason, but not everybody does. Not everybody realises what's going on. It's not on the forefront of people's minds when they vote, for example. They worry about Brexit, they worry about potholes in the road, but they're not worried about climate change because they don't know that it's happening, and they don't understand the consequences or the irreversibility of it. They need to be made to understand. We need to stop taking fossil fuels out of the ground and putting them into the air. We need to stop using pesticides, we need to stop destroying forests, we need to stop levelling huge amounts of the biosphere so that we can grow food. We need to stop overpopulating the planet. We need to stop with the extinction of species. And then finally, our third demand is for a citizens' assembly to oversee these changes, because democracy in its short-termism has failed to get a handle on this problem. Now, just briefly to review the demands. The tell the truth one, this is a very, very typical type of media reporting of these extraordinary changes that we're seeing. This was a BBC article during the bank holiday that we just had that broke all sorts of records for the hottest bank holiday on record. and you can see that it's a bunch of happy people enjoying the sunshine. This is not a happy event. This is a harbinger of doom, and the media have to stop treating it like it's all fun and games and start treating it like the death sentence that it is. Action needs to be immediate. So right now the government is working towards a decarbonisation target of 2050. This is an obsolete target that arose from the Paris Climate Summit in 2015. We already know that 2050 is too late. If a doctor told you that you had a disease and it was going to become metastatic in a year or two, you wouldn't say, okay, well, I'll wait for a year or two until I treat it. You would take immediate action. We need to take immediate action. By 2050, we're already going to be at 500 parts per million carbon dioxide, and the Earth is going to be heating up, and it will continue to heat up with those elevated levels for hundreds of years to come. 2050 is too late. We need to take immediate action. It needs to be the very next government. Whichever government it is, it needs to be that one that makes it happen. We can't just deal with this problem by planting a few more trees. A lot of people think that carbon offsetting can solve this problem. We're producing 42 billion tonnes of carbon worldwide, pumping that into the air every year. One tree, in its 40-year lifetime, provided it stays alive and doesn't burn in a wildfire, can only remove 1 tonne. So we have to plant 42 billion trees to offset 1 year of emissions. That's 17 million hectares. And for those of you that think in kind of Wales as the unit of area, that's 8 Waleses every year have to be planted with trees, just to offset emissions at the level that they are at the moment. That's not allowing for the fact that emissions are continuing to increase. So 42 billion trees this year might be 50 million next year, 55 the year after, 65 the year after that. We're exponentially increasing our emissions. So we have to decarbonise the economy. We have to stop pulling oil out of the ground. It brings in a lot of money, but we've got to stop doing it. We can't think in these short-term ways anymore. We have to stop burning fossil fuels for energy. We have to use renewable energy resources. We have to stop using meat for agriculture, because cattle are an enormous source of greenhouse gases. They account for a very significant proportion of the annual global carbon emissions. We have to stop expanding our airports, expanding our flights, thinking that we can just jump on a plane to take a holiday. We cannot continue to burn fossil fuels in the way that we have been. We need to decarbonise. Now, of course, any government that tried to make those changes would be voted out in the next election, and they know that. Their hands are tied. That's why our third demand is for a citizens' assembly. A citizens' assembly is an assemblage of people who have been selected from the general population to be representative of the population at large. They are not dependent on pleasing voters, so they don't have to look at the next voting cycle. They can look at what we need to do for the long-term good of our future, for our children and our grandchildren. They're free from corporate influences. They represent the views of all the various different stakeholders. Evidence shows that they're trusted, their decisions are trusted by the public because of this freedom from bias and their representative nature. And the citizens' assemblies have been really effective in the past for difficult decisions that governments have needed to make. So ultimately this boils down to the need to take action so that we have a future for our grandchildren. People like me have joined Extinction Rebellion because we want to be able to look our children and grandchildren in the eye and say, when we knew about this problem, we tried to do something. It may or may not have been successful, but we did our best. We tried to make people listen. We tried to speak up. We stepped in people's way and said, look, you have to stop. We were a little bit annoying. We did everything in our power to make people stop and listen and understand. And for those of you in this room who have power, I'm really imploring you on behalf of Extinction Rebellion to listen to us. We're not trying to undermine the government. We're not terrorists. We're people who care about the future and care about the planet and care about humanity. And we want our children and our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren to have a future, and we really hope you will listen to us. Thank you.